He made our house like a circus, but in a good way. He loved spending time with his kids and with my mom. He turned everything into a game or a swim meet or a contest. Maybe that's why we're so competitive.
Tim Conway made the world laugh for more than 5 decades. He was the man who reduced Harvey Korman to tears of helpless laughter night after night on national television. The comedian who played bumbling Ensign Parker on McHale's Navy, and the gentle genius behind The Oldest Man and Mr. Tudball on The Carol Burnett Show.
Let's sit right down here. Have a little something to eat. Let's sit down.
How can you do that?
You get used to it. There you go. Just remember, don't look down.
He earned 5 Primetime Emmy Awards, a Golden Globe Award, and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But behind all that laughter, behind all those accolades, his final years carried a weight that no television sketch could ever prepare his family for. The boy from Willoughby who made America laugh. Thomas Daniel Conway was born on December 15, 1933, in Willoughby, Ohio, a small town northeast of Cleveland. From the very beginning, there was something in him that pushed toward humor. He grew up with an undiagnosed dyslexia that caused him to misread words aloud in school, turning serious classroom moments into accidental comedy. His classmates laughed. He noticed. Something clicked. If people were going to laugh, he decided he might as well lean into it on purpose. After graduating high school, Conway enrolled at Bowling Green State University in Bowling Green, Ohio, where he studied television and radio. He honed his sense of timing as a disc jockey at the college radio station, learning how to hold an audience with nothing but voice and pacing. He graduated in 1956, after which he completed a tour of duty in the United States Army. The military gave him structure and discipline. It also gave him an audience that had no choice but to sit through his material. After his military service, Conway returned to Ohio and landed a job at a local television station in Cleveland. There, working alongside broadcaster Ernie Anderson, he began developing comedic bits that would air during movie intermissions. The pair built a small but loyal audience. Conway was not yet a star, but he was sharpening the instincts that would eventually carry him to national television. He was learning how to be funny in front of a camera without a safety net. His break came through an unlikely connection. Rose Marie, the actress known for her role on The Dick Van Dyke Show, happened to see Conway's local television work and recognized something worth developing. She arranged for him to audition for the Steve Allen Plymouth Show. Allen was so impressed that he gave Conway a regular spot on the program in the early 1960s. It was during this period that Allen also advised him to change his name from Tom to Tim, to avoid confusion with a British actor by the same name. The name change was small, the impact was not. From The Steve Allen Show, Conway moved into what became his first major television role. The ABC sitcom McHale's Navy ran from 1962 to 1966 and starred Ernest Borgnine as the title character. Conway played Ensign Charles Parker, a completely incompetent officer whose well-meaning blunders provided the show's comic engine. Audiences loved watching Parker fumble through the simplest assignments, while Captain Binghamton, played by Joe Flynn, reached ever greater levels of exasperation. Conway had no formal acting training when he joined the cast. He simply walked in and started being funny. That was enough. When McHale's Navy ended in 1966, Conway attempted several solo television projects. None of them lasted. He launched Rango, a Western parody, in 1967. It was canceled quickly. He returned with the Tim Conway Comedy Hour in 1970. Same result. The Tim Conway Show in 1980 survived slightly longer, but still failed to find a permanent audience. In fact, Conway's car license plate famously read 13WKS, a self-aware joke about the fact that most of his solo television series were canceled within 13 weeks of premiering. His willingness to laugh at his own failures said something fundamental about who he was as a person. Despite those setbacks, Conway kept working steadily. He appeared in guest roles, made films, and stayed visible in the entertainment world. He was not the kind of performer who disappeared between projects. He simply kept showing up, kept being funny, and kept building the reputation that would eventually lead him to the single greatest showcase of his career. That showcase arrived not as a starring role, but as a supporting one, which in many ways suited his particular genius perfectly. Tim Conway had always been at his best when he had someone else to work off of, and he was about to find the perfect partner. The Carol Burnett Show. The Carol Burnett Show premiered on CBS in 1967 and ran until 1978. It was a variety program built on sketch comedy, musical numbers, and a small ensemble cast that included Carol Burnett herself, Harvey Korman, Vicki Lawrence, and Lyle Waggoner. Tim Conway began appearing as a frequent guest during the early years of the show before becoming a full regular cast member in 1975. From that point forward, the program became something genuinely different from anything else on American television. Conway was the reason why. What made Conway extraordinary on the show was not just his ability to perform scripted material well. It was his genius for improvisation within a live audience taping environment. He would take a written sketch, perform it faithfully for a moment or two, and then start adding material. New physical bits, extended monologues, absurd digressions that had nothing to do with the original script. The cast would try to hold it together. They almost never succeeded. His primary target and greatest foil was Harvey Korman. The two men formed a comedy partnership that became one of the most celebrated in television history. Korman was tall, classically trained, and gifted with precise comic timing. Conway was short, deceptively nondescript, and operating almost entirely on instinct. When Conway went off script, Korman would fight desperately to maintain his composure. He almost never won. Cameras regularly caught Korman doubled over, shaking with laughter, completely unable to continue. Conway, meanwhile, would remain in character, deadpan, as if nothing unusual was happening. Several Conway sketches became iconic pieces of American television comedy history. The dentist sketch, in which Conway played a novice dentist who repeatedly injected himself with Novocaine rather than his patient, left Korman so incapacitated by laughter that he could not complete the scene. Conway himself noted in interviews that during that particular sketch, Korman's physical reaction went well beyond simply breaking character. The audience responded to both the sketch and to Korman's helplessness in equal measure. That dual layer of comedy, the bit itself and the performer's uncontrollable reaction to it, became the show's signature. Another enduring character from this period was the oldest man, a creeping, shuffling elderly gentleman who moved at the pace of cold molasses and delivered each line with the maximum possible delay. Conway could stretch a 2-minute scene to 7 or 8 minutes simply by walking across a room in character. The physical commitment was total. Audiences could not look away. Even knowing what was coming, even having seen the character before, viewers found themselves unable to stop laughing at the sheer patience and dedication Conway poured into the performance. His work on The Carol Burnett Show earned him 4 Emmy Awards, 3 as a performer and 1 as a writer. He also won a Golden Globe Award during his time with the program. Carol Burnett herself was open about what Conway brought to the show and to the ensemble. She described his instincts as something rare, something that could not be manufactured or rehearsed. His ability to find comedy in unexpected places, to follow a scene wherever the funny led, set a standard for the show that elevated everyone around him. After The Carol Burnett Show ended in 1978, Conway and Korman toured together for years in a live comedy show called Together Again. The tour drew large audiences and demonstrated that the chemistry between the two men was not confined to a television studio. It existed in any room where they performed together. Conway also continued building his film career during this period, appearing in family comedies like The Apple Dumpling Gang in 1975, The Shaggy D.A. in 1976, and Cannonball Run 2 in 1984. These movies were not artistically ambitious projects. but they reached wide audiences and kept Conway's face visible across multiple generations of viewers. Dorf, SpongeBob, and the later career nobody expected. By the mid-1980s, Tim Conway had figured out something that most performers of his generation had not. The television and film studios were not the only path to an audience. The home video market was exploding, and consumers were actively looking for content to fill their VCR players. Conway saw an opportunity that required almost no budget and could be delivered directly to the people who had always liked him most. In 1987, he created a character named Dorf. The concept was disarmingly simple. Conway played a short-statured, heavily mustachioed sports enthusiast with a thick Swedish accent. The trick was purely physical. Conway performed on his knees with shoes attached to them, creating the illusion of a character who stood perhaps 4 feet tall. He would then attempt to explain and demonstrate various sports with the confident enthusiasm of an expert and the actual competence of someone who had never played any sport in their life. The first Dorf video was titled Dorf on Golf. The result was a genuine commercial phenomenon. Dorf on Golf sold close to 500,000 copies at around $30 each through mail order and video store distribution. Conway had bypassed Hollywood entirely, produced the video himself, and delivered it straight to the living rooms of Middle America. More Dorf videos followed. Dorf on fishing, Dorf goes auto racing, Dorf goes skiing, and several others maintained the same format and the same loyal audience. Conway had essentially invented a direct-to-consumer comedy model 2 decades before the internet made such distribution commonplace. Through the 1990s, Conway continued doing guest television appearances and picking up occasional film work. He appeared in Dear God in 1996 and Air Bud 2 in 1998. He also won 2 additional Emmy Awards for guest appearances, one for a role on Coach in 1996, and another for a role on 30 Rock in 2008, bringing his total Emmy count to 6. These later wins demonstrated something important about Conway's lasting ability. He was not simply coasting on nostalgia. He was still doing genuinely funny work in front of new writers and new casts who recognized the quality of what he brought. In 1999, Conway began voicing a character on a new animated program that would introduce him to an entirely different generation of fans. Nickelodeon's SpongeBob SquarePants featured Conway as Barnacle Boy, the elderly sidekick to Mermaid Man, voiced by his old McHale's Navy co-star, Ernest Borgnine. It was a gentle piece of casting symmetry that fans appreciated. Conway performed the role from 1999 to 2012, appearing in dozens of episodes. His signature voice, that wheeze of perpetual mild indignation, translated perfectly into animation. For children born in the 1990s and the early 2000s, Tim Conway was not primarily the man from the Carol Burnett Show. He was Barnacle Boy, the grumbling companion who wanted to be taken seriously as a superhero and was perpetually denied that dignity. The role required none of his physical comedy. It required only his voice, his instinct for frustrated comedy, and more importantly for producers, his willingness to play supporting characters without ego. All 3 of those qualities he had in abundance. In 2002, Conway published his autobiography, What's So Funny? My Hilarious Life, which became a best-selling account of his career told in the same self-deprecating tone that had always defined his public persona. He received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1999 and was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame in 2002. In 2013, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award in comedy. The recognition came late, as it often does for performers who spend careers being funny without demanding credit. But it came, and Conway accepted it with characteristic grace. The diagnosis that changed everything. Sometime around 2010, people close to Tim Conway began noticing changes. He was in his late 70s and still active professionally, still making occasional appearances and completing voice work. But something was shifting. His balance was not quite right. Conversations would wander. His recall slipped in ways that went beyond ordinary age, age-related forgetfulness. The signs were gradual, the kind that can easily be explained away in the early stages because they do not look alarming in isolation. It is only when they accumulate that the picture becomes clear. The eventual diagnosis was normal pressure hydrocephalus, abbreviated as NPH. It is a neurological condition in which cerebrospinal fluid builds up in the brain's ventricles, creating pressure against surrounding brain tissue. The symptoms it produces look almost identical to Alzheimer's disease. Memory loss, difficulty walking, confusion, loss of bladder control. Many patients with NPH are initially misdiagnosed with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia because the presentations overlap so completely. The critical difference is that NPH can sometimes be treated through surgical placement of a shunt, a small device that drains the excess fluid away from the brain. Kelly Conway, Tim's eldest daughter from his first marriage to Marianne Dalton, later revealed in her 2021 memoir, "My Dad's Funnier Than Your Dad," growing up with Tim Conway in the funniest house in America, that she and her siblings watched their father's condition progress with growing alarm. The man who had filled every room he entered with energy and laughter was becoming increasingly unreachable. The disease was working methodically, taking things away one at a time, and there was nothing anyone could do to hurry a diagnosis or a treatment plan. By 2018, Conway's condition had deteriorated to the point where he required full-time professional care. He had become almost entirely unresponsive. He could not communicate reliably. He could not make decisions about his own welfare. According to court documents that would later become public, a court-appointed attorney who visited Conway to assess his condition reported that he showed no ability or willingness to speak, and no apparent awareness of what a conservatorship even was. The comedian who had once held audiences across the country in the palm of his hand could no longer respond to a direct question. The medical situation created a legal question with no easy answer. Someone needed to hold legal authority over Tim Conway's medical decisions. His second wife, Charlene Fusco Conway, whom he had married in 1984, had been his primary caregiver throughout his decline. She had power of attorney and healthcare directives designating her as his caregiver, documents that Conway had signed before his condition deteriorated to the point where he could no longer communicate. That documentation, in Charlene's view, made the question of conservatorship unnecessary and premature. Kelly saw it differently. She and her brothers were watching their father's condition progress, and they had specific concerns about the medical decisions being made on his behalf. The shunt procedure that could potentially alleviate the symptoms of NPH had, in Kelly's account, been recommended by neurologists but had not been approved by Charlene. From Kelly's perspective, a treatment option that doctors believed was worth attempting was being blocked. That was not something she could stand aside and accept quietly. Not when the person affected was her father. The conservatorship battle that split the family. In August 2018, Kelly Conway filed court documents with the Los Angeles Superior Court seeking conservatorship over her father. The filings laid out her case in direct terms. She stated that Tim Conway could not properly provide for his own personal needs, including food, clothing, and physical health. She described him as almost entirely unresponsive. She also alleged that Charlene was planning to move Conway from the skilled nursing facility where he was currently receiving care and place him in a facility she believed was inferior and unable to provide the level of medical attention her father required. A week after the initial filing, the court granted Kelly a temporary restraining order that prevented Conway from being moved to any new facility. That was a small but significant legal victory for Kelly's position. The court agreed, at least provisionally, that there was enough cause for concern to pause any residential change while the larger conservatorship question was resolved. The case was now officially in the California court system, and what had been a private family matter became public record. Charlene responded firmly. She denied that she had ever planned to move Conway to an inferior facility. She argued that she was already providing for all of her husband's needs and that no conservatorship was necessary. She pointed to the power of attorney and healthcare directives that Conway had executed while he was still capable of making such decisions. Those documents expressed his wish for Charlene to make decisions on his behalf. If a conservator was going to be appointed despite her objections, she argued, it should be her, not Kelly. In September 2018, while the case was still proceeding, Tim Conway underwent brain surgery. The surgery was related to his NPH, involving a shunt procedure to attempt to address the fluid buildup. Following the surgery, he was released to the Beechwood Post-Acute and Rehabilitation Facility on October 15th for recovery. Judge Robert Wada of the Los Angeles Superior Court rejected Kelly's petition for a temporary conservatorship at this point, reasoning that the immediate medical concerns she had raised were addressed by the hospitalization and surgery. The larger permanent conservatorship question remained unresolved. The legal process continued through the autumn and winter of 2018 and into early 2019. In March 2019, People magazine reported that the dispute had been settled through an agreement between Kelly and Charlene. The Los Angeles court found clear and convincing evidence that a conservatorship of Tim Conway was necessary, meaning the court formally determined that Conway could not manage his own affairs. Charlene was appointed as Conway's conservator, having been found suitable and qualified by the court. Kelly consented to the appointment. Kelly's publicist, Roger Neal, released a statement to USA Today following the resolution. He said that Kelly was very happy with the outcome after more than a year of fighting to keep her father safe. The statement also confirmed that Kelly retained the right to visit her father and to meet with his healthcare professionals if she wished. The legal confrontation had ended in a settlement that gave the official conservatorship to Charlene while ensuring Kelly had continued access to her father and to information about his care. The toll the legal battle took on everyone involved was substantial. Conway was 84 years old and had been living in a care facility while his wife and daughter argued in public court filings about who was better positioned to oversee his welfare. Entertainment media covered every new development in the case. Fans who had loved him for decades suddenly found themselves reading legal documents instead of watching comedy sketches. The contrast between the public image of Tim Conway and the private reality of his final years could not have been starker. Kelly later addressed the conservatorship battle directly in her memoir. She described the experience as a mess, a word that captured the emotional and logistical chaos of having family grief turn into courtroom procedure. She had acted out of love for her father and deep concern about the medical decisions being made on his behalf. Charlene had acted out of love for her husband and a belief that she was the appropriate person to make those decisions. Both positions were sincere. Neither position made the situation any less painful. The final day, the last goodbye, and the legacy left behind. On May 14, 2019, Tim Conway died at a care facility in Los Angeles. He was 85 years old. The cause of death was listed as complications from normal pressure hydrocephalus. According to reports from his publicist Howard Bragman, who headed La Brea Media, Conway's wife Charlene Fusco and his daughter Jackie were at his side when he passed. The conservatorship dispute had been settled just weeks earlier, and whatever unresolved feelings the legal battle had generated were still fresh when the end came. Kelly Conway released a statement to Fox News later that day. She spoke for herself and her 6 siblings, including Tim Jr., Patrick, Jamie, Corey, and Cian. The statement was direct and grief-filled and reflected the complexity of the years that had just passed. Kelly said her father was at peace. She said the love he had given his family and the laughter he had given the world would never be replaced, but would be remembered forever. She said she would miss him every single day until they met again in heaven. There was no bitterness in those words. There was only loss. Carol Burnett responded the same day. She told reporters that she was heartbroken. She described Conway as one in a million, not only as a brilliant comedian, but as a loving human being. She said she cherished the time they had shared both on screen and off, and that he would remain in her heart forever. Vicki Lawrence, who had worked alongside Conway for the full run of the Carol Burnett Show, described working with him as pure joy. The tributes that poured in from across the entertainment world reflected a genuine affection that went beyond professional admiration. Conan O'Brien wrote on social media that when he was a child watching the Carol Burnett Show, no one made him laugh harder than Tim Conway. He called him a sweet and effortlessly funny man. Al Roker invoked the legendary dentist sketch as a lasting example of Conway's genius. Fans of SpongeBob SquarePants grieved Barnacle Boy. People who had watched McHale's Navy in the 1960s remembered Ensign Parker. Multiple generations had connected with Tim Conway through completely different pieces of work, and each generation mourned the piece of television history it had known best. Tim Conway was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Westwood, California, a cemetery that has long been the final resting place of significant figures from the entertainment industry. In lieu of flowers, his family requested that donations be made to the Lou Ruvo Brain Center at the Cleveland Clinic in Las Vegas, a choice that reflected the nature of the disease that had shaped his final years, and the hope that research might eventually give other families a different outcome. Kelly's memoir, published in 2021 through Lyons Press, gave the public its most complete picture of what Tim Conway's final years actually looked like from the inside. She wrote about a childhood spent in a house full of laughter, about a father who brought the same creative energy home that he brought to the television studio, about the racetrack at Santa Anita Park, where Conway taught his children about horse racing, about the ways he used humor as a genuine expression of love rather than simply a professional tool. But the memoir also spoke directly about the later years, about watching a man of extraordinary vitality slowly lose his ability to speak, to walk, to recognize the people he loved. It spoke about the courage it required to file legal papers against a stepmother, knowing the relationship damage that would follow. It spoke about the loneliness of fighting for someone who could no longer fight for himself, or even tell you whether the fight was what he would have wanted. Kelly wrote with honesty about the emotional cost of all of it, and about the love that made the cost worth bearing. Tim Conway's legacy is ultimately held in the recordings. The sketches from the Carol Burnett Show have been watched millions of times on YouTube and streaming platforms by people who were not born when the show originally aired. The dentist sketch, the elephant story, the oldest man shuffling across a studio stage while Harvey Korman disintegrated into helpless laughter beside him. These moments have proven genuinely timeless. They do not age the way so much comedy does. They remain funny in any decade, in any cultural context, because they are built on something permanent. A man doing something extraordinary with his body and his timing, and his refusal to telegraph where the joke is going. The story of his final years, the disease that took his voice, his mobility, and eventually his life, and the family conflict that surrounded his care, adds a dimension to the public legacy that cannot be ignored once it is known. It does not diminish what he achieved. If anything, it makes the achievement feel more valuable. He gave enormous amounts of joy to the world while carrying a private life that was complicated and ultimately very hard. Most people who work in entertainment do. Tim Conway happened to be better at the giving part than almost anyone who ever stood in front of a camera. What normal pressure hydrocephalus does to a person is particularly cruel in the context of who Tim Conway was. The disease attacks, among other things, the ability to move and to speak. For a man whose entire life's work depended on physical performance, on the precision control of a shuffling gait, on the split-second decision to add one more beat before a punchline landed, losing control of his own body was not simply a medical loss. It was the erasure of the very instrument through which he had communicated with the world for 60 years. The oldest man had always been a character performed for laughs. By the end, the slowness and the silence were no longer a performance. There is also something worth acknowledging in the way Tim Conway navigated fame throughout his career. He was never the biggest name on any marquee. On McHale's Navy, Ernest Borgnine was the headliner. On the Carol Burnett Show, Burnett was the star, and Harvey Korman was her primary partner. Conway came in as a guest and eventually became a regular, but he was always positioned as the ensemble addition rather than the anchor. He wore that positioning with complete ease. He did not need to be the headliner to be the funniest person in the room. He understood, instinctively, that comedy is often more powerful when it comes from the side of the stage rather than from center. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.